Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Activating Greatness, the show where we dig into what it really takes to lead with purpose, inspire performance, and create lasting impact. As always, I'm your host, Alec McChesney, and every episode we sit down with leaders, thinkers, and change makers who are unlocking potential in themselves, their teams, and their organizations. Here, we talk about the real stuff, leadership that drives culture, strategy that creates momentum, and the mindset that turns good intentions into game-changing results. Because greatness, it isn't a title, it's a choice. It's something you activate every single day. So thank you. Thank you for listening, for showing up, and for being part of a community of leaders who refuse to settle for good enough. Now, let's dive in and meet today's incredible guest. Today's guest is Jeanne Hecht, CEO and Executive Chairwoman of Lexitas Pharma Services, a global clinical research organization focused on ophthalmology. Jeanne brings decades of leadership experience across the pharmaceutical and clinical research industries, and today leads an organization known for its highly engaged culture, strong retention, and intentional approach to leadership. Under her leadership, Lexitas has built a culture where people are aligned around a clear vision, empowered to contribute, and supported in doing meaningful work. And today, we're going to talk about how to intentionally build a culture that people actually want to be a part of, how vision becomes a decision-making lens, and why sustained engagement is built over time, not overnight. And I'm also excited because maybe 15 episodes ago, we had Julie Blasingham on the show from Univo IRB, and one of the individuals that she recommended to be on the podcast was Jeanne. So Jeanne, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for this episode. I know that I can get off and running. Everybody that is listening is waiting for your introduction from yourself. So before we jump into the show, I'd love to have you further introduce yourself and give a little bit more background for maybe those who aren't familiar with you.
All right. Well, thanks, Alec. It's nice to be on the show. I'm not great at talking about myself, but I have been in the industry for almost a little bit over 30 years, and I've had a lot of different roles in this industry. So I was a pharmacy technician, I was a project manager, I was a sales rep, I was a head of operations, I ran sales for a publicly traded company, and then I've been into a number of C-suite positions, and it's been a lot of fun. It's a great journey, and I value the friendships and the network that I've built up and invested in over the last 30 years that helped me to meet the expectations of my employees, my client sponsors, and my owners and my partners.
Oh, I love it. And, I think an interesting perspective that I love on the Activating Greatness show is how many leaders aren't necessarily comfortable or excited to talk about themselves, or even maybe hesitant to say, am I really an expert in this topic? And then when we get
Mhm.
into it, it's like, hey, everything that you're doing is what we're looking for. Those are the types of stories that we are trying to tell. And your background is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast in the first place. And especially when you tie your background in with an organization that really is known for having a highly engaged culture. And you and I talked about the strong retention that you've built over the last couple of years, especially in today's environment in 2025. And I want to start just at the highest level through that background and getting to this point where you're at today. What have you learned through those different roles and the role that you sit in now of what it really takes to build that type of culture, and why it's something that's worth investing in and worth being intentional about time after time?
So one thing I'll say is that building culture in a highly effective leadership team and a highly engaged workforce is a full contact sport. I mean, there's no other way to say it.
Yeah.
And it's not for the faint of heart. And there are individuals who really excel at this. And it requires a tremendous amount of effort from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top. And what you can't have within either of those directions are individuals who are not as vested or committed as to the culture that you're trying to build. Because when you do have individuals that are not as committed or vested in the culture that you're trying to build, that can be like maybe we say it's a parasite, maybe we say it's a cancer, but it can
Yeah.
really eat at the foundation and elements that make your organization special. It requires a lot of focus. This is not something, and I see this a lot. I talk to a lot of people in the industry who say, their culture is perhaps having challenges, that they spend too much time dealing with politics. Nobody
Mm,
knows. There's lots of stuff written on the back of the shirt that's not on the front of the shirt, and you don't know what's on the back of your shirt. And so we as a leadership team, with me at the helm of that leadership team, have spent a lot of time making sure, number one, I had the right leaders in place, that
yeah.
they were as bought into the strategy and the objectives that I had laid out. And to be honest, I have had some wrong hires, and those folks are no longer here. And I can say that my leadership team that I have right now is fully committed. We're focused on our culture. And as a result, we're seeing the results, right? And it's an hour, minute, hour, day, week, month, quarter, year activity. It's not something that we just pick up every Friday at 2 in the afternoon. It's not something that we talk about twice a year. It's something
Mm,
that we talk about daily, and it involves everyone in the organization. We've been doing something recently, which has been a lot of fun, that we've implemented this year to try to continue to build on our culture, and that is taking a playbook out of the military on after action reports. So when we get done with a meeting, it's not some bureaucratic 5-page document. It's literally a conversation. Hey guys, we just went through a proposal. We just went through a client meeting. We just had an internal rollout of our benefits. What went well? What went wrong? What would we change? Quick conversation.
yeah.
And so we're trying to do that so everybody has a say and is able to really focus on the organization and constantly improving the organization.
Mm.
Um, so for me, it's really important that I spend a lot of my time, and that again, it's not a job, it's a labor of love, and it's a passion.
Yeah. Well, there's so much good there, but I do want to double click on two things that you said. And the first is that it is not something that you do in 1 minute, 1 day, 1 month, 1 quarter, 1 year. And you tie that in with you as a CEO and the leader of the organization saying that I have to invest in it. And a
Mhm.
lot of times what we hear is, oh, I'm being dragged into culture. I'm being dragged into trying to support the happiness of my employees. And clearly you're viewing that as, hey, that's front and center in this role. And it's something that we have to invest in time and time again. It's not set it and forget it. And one of my favorite quotes that I hear all the time about culture is culture takes a long time to build, but it takes one moment to break it. And similarly with trust. And so if we forget about it, if we move on, or if we assume because the satisfaction was good in 2025, it's automatically going to be there in 2026, you can kind of fall asleep at the wheel a little bit and it can start to go into a different direction. So I think that I wanted to call that out and just kind of ask, was that a learned behavior for you? Was that, hey, I saw some cultures that I loved, some that I didn't? What led to you saying, no, in this role, this is something that I'm going to double down on. It's something that I'm going to hire to. It's something that I'm going to manage up to at the private equity level and let them know this is what I believe in. How did you really form that thought process?
Well, I'd say two things. First, I've been in companies that have very toxic cultures,
Yeah.
and everyone knows them. And sometimes they feel a little bit like endangered species organizations. There's a lot of people who are out there and still exist in the organization, and you don't quite understand why.
Hmm.
They're perhaps the noisemakers in the organization, and like a whole group of people could come to an agreement, and then you leave the meeting, and then this one person starts going around trying to erode the trust and the agreement that was made. And
Yeah.
I've been in companies of that culture, and I absolutely hate it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we spend too much time at work for any of us to work in a culture that we don't like.
Yeah.
And I want to work around people I like, people I trust, and people I wouldn't mind, getting stuck in an airport with or having a beer with, right?
Yeah.
And I look at culture as a strategic value driver. And that does come down actually from our private equity, QHP Capital. They have a keen focus on building high performing cultures within their portfolio companies. You've talked to Julie. I
Yeah.
know she's talked a lot about it. We spend a lot of time talking about how culture is a strategic value driver. Just to give it a case in point, as a ophthalmic CRO, a lot of times we have contracts, and those contracts have bonus penalties around team turnover, right?
Mm,
So if we have high turnover, we feel we get penalized, and that means then we have take a hit on the margin.
yeah.
And I'm willing to put that penalty out there because we have such an engaged culture and we have such a high retention rate, low turnover rate.
Yeah.
We're also a small organization, and so it's very it's much more of an issue when someone leaves this
Yeah.
organization.
So
So
you have to keep a pulse on it at all times because one
yes,
person leaving could lead
yeah,
to four and four. That's where you start to have big shifts within an organization.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So I want to ask, you talked about the culture being a part of the strategy.
Yeah.
And when we talk about culture, especially at Velocity, we don't talk about culture as just a set of words on the wall. It's how we
Mm-mm.
show up. It's the vision of the company. It is who we are day in and day out. And a lot of times, especially with my background on the marketing side, I like to picture that brand story, the vision of the organization, and why we work here as the culture. That all of that together, the people, the processes, that's all built into it. And when you started at Lexitas, you mentioned in our prep call that the vision was it was just a vision. It was a set of words probably on the website, and it was not applicable to the company that you wanted to be. And it certainly didn't live up to where you are today. So can you just talk us through kind of what
Yeah.
changed and how that vision and getting it right served as a lens for the culture, served as a lens for the strategic direction of the company. And again, not just the words on the wall.
So when I took over, our vision was we wanted to be the premier ophthalmic product development partner. Like,
You and anybody else that works within this space,
and
right?
so it's like, I hate to say it, but that like is just, it doesn't get me out of bed.
Yeah.
Okay, right? And like you said, it's completely undifferentiated. And
Yeah.
I don't really believe it aligns with my client sponsors' goals, right?
Mm,
So we sat in a room and in January of 24, and we said, what would really define who we are? And so I came up with, let's just make it really simple. We want to change the way people see the world. So what does that tell you? That tells you we're committed to ophthalmology. So I'm not going out and running a cardiovascular study or Crohn's program.
yeah.
People can get behind that. Like if I knew that you had a vision altering illness and I told you that my company wants to change the way people see the world, you and I would have an immediate connection. And
Yeah.
perhaps even if you didn't, it's just something so much more engaging. And we want to do that by being an employer of choice and being a partner of choice worldwide. But again, when I thought about what's our vision, that's our vision. And that's
Yeah.
something that makes people excited. It also defines what we do and how we do it. I didn't say that I want to change the way people see the world by, gleaning the most profits. I didn't say I want to change the way people see the world by setting up low cost centers around the globe. I just said I wanted to change the way people see the world.
Yeah.
That then leads into, and when I think about then as a company, we have our strategy on a page and then we have our culture on a page. But the strategy feeds into the culture and the culture feeds into the strategy. And when we're working through that, it's important that we have both of those elements
Mm,
because if my strategy, since I say I want to change the way people see the world, my strategy is not to go out and build capabilities in another therapeutic area. My strategy, because I say then I'm going to do that by being the employer of choice and the partner of choice worldwide, then that means my strategy has to be all around my being the employer of choice and being a
Yeah.
partner of choice worldwide. And if I didn't have those two things connected, there's no focus and no direction for the company. Now, it took us a while to get here. It took having the right leaders. It took having the right commitment by from all the different levels within the organization, and it took a hell of a lot of time having conversations and actually making sure that that resonated,
Right.
and then taking that information up and feeding it back into our strategy and our culture work.
I also love that you had the external view on this. You talked about the client sponsors and you talk about the
Mhm.
patient, right? Yeah, so often we set this mission, vision, values, and it's all about us. And it gets
Yeah.
lost in this crowd of especially in the sea of sameness that is the life sciences. You are able to create that differentiated story and then have buy-in. So a follow-up question that I have for that, you talked about it took time. What about internally to the organization? What are some of the things that you implemented as you're changing the vision to say, hey, we're changing this, and this isn't just changing it to change it. We're changing this for the better. We're changing this because we want to evolve as an organization. And whether you are, the lowest on the totem pole, the highest on the totem pole, the first person here, the last person here from a hiring perspective, we want everybody to believe in this. This now is a part of our philosophy and our organization's culture. What are some of the things that you did to really help that stick?
So foundationally, we created our pyramid, which has the patient at the top and goes through our vision, mission, and values.
It's
And those
great.
values we have set up as what are the company values, what are team values, and what are individual values, right? And then we use that slide in all trainings, all onboarding, all hiring, every town hall, every key business review, every board meeting. And we're sharing that slide just to ground ourselves before we enter into the room, shall we say, and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Then the other thing that we did was I started doing what's called Java with Genies, like small round tables where I met with folks. I'd send them a $5 or $10 Starbucks gift card. We'd have a conversation. I'd ask a couple questions, and it was an open forum. Then the next thing that we started doing was, and my head of HR, she runs Mochas with Michelle. We
Mm,
have an employee engagement committee, and that various people from across the organization that's helping us to think through ways that we can connect with our employees in better, smarter, and more impactful ways. I spend a lot of my time on the road, so I'm in front of clients, I'm in front of in front of employees. When I go to Michigan, for example, I ask who's in Michigan, and we all get together for lunch, right? I'm
that's great.
trying to do that so that when I'm there, I'm also trying to relate because we work in a virtual environment predominantly. We've got a small office here in Raleigh, but a large percentage of our employees aren't here. We do bring people in, and when we bring people in, that our mission, vision, values, and our pyramid is at the front of every discussion and meeting. We do a lot of skip level discussions as well. We have a pulse survey to ask are the elements of the culture resonating with you? Like, I want to make sure we're not drinking our own Kool-Aid, right?
Yes.
We can take the thing that I worry a lot about is taking our eye off it because our results are good.
Yep.
And I want to make sure that we don't. And we've had very high retention the last 20, almost 24 months. I want to
That's
make
awesome.
sure that we maintain that.
Yeah. Because again, like you said, at an organization, especially where there is a remote angle to it, one person leaving can create that friction if you
Yes.
let it slip. I want to just highlight that. I know you're in an office for those that might be watching a LinkedIn clip, but you have a remote team and it's
Mhm.
possible to still invest in culture in the right way, even with a remote team.
Yep.
And the Jabba's with Jeanne, Mocha's with Michelle, meeting in person, bringing them in. And what I loved is even you mentioned on the pyramid, and you have the patient first, then what this means. What does it actually look like at the individual level to live these values? What does it look like at the organizational level to live these values? And I'm sure it also becomes a hiring and a firing lens and even bringing clients on. Is this client going to help us drive this mission and vision forward, or are they going to cause a lot of issues for us in a team culture and be a disruptor that maybe we don't need to bring on right now? And again, it just comes back to that culture ties into strategy, and then strategy ties into culture. They cannot be in a silo, which I think is so important for people to hear.
And we measure our employees on our values. So are they accountable? Are they authentic? Are they passionate? When we're looking at, we have what's called the Seymour Circle, because we have our little mascot, Seymour,
Yes.
Seemore, right? He's
I
our little
love
fun
it.
guy. So with Seymour Circle, you can be nominated for Seymour Circle based upon living one of our values. So are you, as a team, like if a team wins Seymour Circle, were they innovative, collaborative, respectful, or as individuals, were they passionate, authentic, and accountable? And
Oh, that's great.
you can nominate your colleagues for this, or somebody who works for you, and then they then get called out of the town hall and get a little bit of swag and recognition.
Oh, I love the external recognition, love the mascot. And I also, for those that are listening, I feel it's necessary to re-say it, that this is not, this mission and the vision and the values were not said one time at a town hall. They weren't in
Mhm.
one deck. It is a repeatable process. And I had, I think it might have been Lisa Clicklio over at WCG, but we were just talking about this on a past podcast in terms of it being portable. It needs to be memorable. It needs to be consistent from a mission, vision, values standpoint. And it sounds like what you have done is anybody on the team at any time can pull out of their pocket what these values are, what it means to work really well, what right looks like. And ultimately, that's when you know you have a strong culture and a strong understanding of the impact that you're making at the organizational, team, and individual level.
Exactly. Yes, it's, I
Oh,
mean, it's on our extranet. It is an option, definitely, they're trained how to, they have access to resources.
that's
We
great.
want to make sure that it's not within, any more than a small little reach for them to grab it and see it.
Yeah. Okay, I want to pivot to something that you said earlier on, which was, we spend a lot of time at work. And when I started at Velocity, almost, gosh, now 7 or 8 months ago now, I was asking a bunch of our clients, hey, why would you hire Velocity? What impact do we create? I was asking that internally and externally. And one of the answers I got is, well, most humans are going to spend more than 60% of their adult life at work. It might as well not suck. And
Yes.
it has been so refreshing to hear leaders like yourselves repeat that, because there are certain generations, especially the younger ones that are entering the workforce, that don't believe that opinion exists in other generations. And there is now a generational divide of what work means. And you saying we spend way too much time at work for it to not be great. In our prep call, I think we both, added in that we don't want it to suck. It sounds so simple, but it's not how most organizations operate. And it's certainly not how individuals perceive a lot of leaders. So,
Yeah.
what does that actually look like for you? How are you mindful of creating an environment, not only for yourself, but for teams to want to show up, who enjoy showing up? And then the impact is they're probably happier people, which means they're going to contribute more, they're going to stay, and they're going to invest in themselves at the same level that you are. So pretty big question here. And if we solve this, we could probably sell it to a lot of companies. But what are your thoughts here?
Well, I don't know if we'll solve it, but I'll give you the couple nuggets that I've taken
Yeah.
away. And I was down with my leadership team in Florida a couple weeks ago, and my CFO brought up the fact that we do serious work, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And
Mm,
we've written that into our strategy and our culture. And it is about laughing, it is about taking the time. This company has been through a lot of ups and downs up until probably, I'm going to call it mid 24. And the last 2 years have just been very enjoyable. And I will tell you that the first year wasn't as enjoyable. And it wasn't as enjoyable because we were going through a lot of pain. We were working
Yeah.
through a lot of leadership changes, a lot of evolution and change within the company, a lot of folks who were on the bus and some who were not on the bus. And
Hmm.
it took a while to really find, what makes a good Lexington. And once we figured out that, it ended up becoming just this really fun place to work. And for people that send gifts around and just different funny pictures and videos, we all have call signs. So in the leadership, so this is my call sign, Miracle Whip, and they all come with a story behind it. And that's something that my chief medical officer put into place because he was in the military and was a pilot. And so all pilots have call signs.
Yeah.
And so we've been trying to really do a number of those things that are fun, a little kitschy, but also it's about how you treat people and how you want to be treated. So I have seen really good leaders who sabotage themselves because they're fun, they're enjoyable in a meeting, but what you don't know is that they're teasing their other colleagues and they're talking about you, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I absolutely hate that. That is, I don't like drama and I don't do well with drama. And so as a result, we've really spent a lot of time having kind of leadership principles, team engagement principles. How do we want to treat each other? And how do we want to engage? And as a result, we do serious work and we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah. I I just want that to sit for a little while because everybody needs to hear that. I love the we do serious work, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And especially in the life sciences, it's utterly important work that's impacting patients all over the world. And so you have to have that level of seriousness about the work. But I love the little things that you are doing to be human beings at work. And one of the things that Velocity was founded on is the disc profiles in the birds
Yeah.
and having owls and eagles and doves and parrots and just having a different way to communicate and to understand what is Jeannie like? What is Alec like? How should we communicate more effectively together? Because human relationships, the data shows itself when there are happy individuals in terms of, hey, I like the people I work with, I trust the people I work with, and I would hang out with them. I would invite them to my wedding. I would not be upset if the flight got delayed. They're more likely to contribute more and be more effective and also believe in the mission, vision, and values of the organization. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate the answer, right? It
Yeah.
is just how can we implement the small things to make life, to make our day to day process at work a little bit more human centric and not feel like we are all just cogs in the machine. Understanding that we have results based outcomes and we have to
Yeah.
hit that. But I think you owning that and your leadership team owning that, it gives the rest of the team permission to feel that as well. And the rest of the team permission to say, okay, if they're doing it, then certainly I can as well. And I can have a little bit of fun or play at work while still getting the job done and creating the impact that we want to create.
Exactly. Exactly. I couldn't have said any better. There's so much good work that we can do together. And the only way we're going to do really good work is if we enjoy the people that we work with.
Yeah. So every time that I talk about culture, frankly, it feels like lately, Jeannie, and for those listening, that every conversation I have, it's like, well, yeah, of course we should do that. Well, yeah, of course we should train or invest or do. And then it still doesn't happen for so many organizations. I'm going to ask, I think I told you I'm allowed one bad podcast question every episode because I get to make the rules. I think I'm going to use it here. In your perspective, purely your opinion, not even inside your organization, what's the biggest hang up for leaders who know that this is important and should be something they invest in, but aren't able to commit to it? Where is the disconnect from, yes, of course, I want my people to be happy and we need them to be happy, to be retained and confident and want to work here, but I don't have the time. We don't have the time. We don't have the budget, and we'll push it off till next year, or we'll try to fix it next year. We'll throw a Band-Aid on it. Where's that disconnect, and how can we maybe open more eyes as we go through this process, for the rest of the year and into 2027 and beyond?
They don't see it as a strategic value driver, and they believe that people aren't what actually makes their organization great. They believe that anyone could do the job. And I had a meeting, I presented at a group of women leaders here at the end of last year as part of a nonprofit organization. And a woman who was the head of HR, CHRO for a company, came up to me afterwards and said to me, I can't get my CEO to believe that people aren't replaceable. And she said, so as a result, we have high turnover and our culture is toxic. And her job, he said to her, that's HR's job to fix it. And it is not HR's job to fix it. It is a full team effort, led by, supported by, and quite frankly, somewhat enforced by the CEO. It is not just the head of HR's job. And I think that too many CEOs, CFOs, they don't see the connection between profit generation, stable revenue growth, stable sales, and a highly engaged and committed team. And if these CEOs and CFOs did see that connection, then they would have a higher engaged workforce.
Yeah. Might have been a bad question, but it was an unbelievable answer, and one that I would like to put on those moving billboards or on a commercial across the country. And it's, on the marketing side, I love Dave Gerhardt. He does B2B marketing. Always talks about life's too short to work for a CEO who doesn't believe in marketing. And now when I'm in this seat, I hear what that CHRO is saying on a frequent basis. Hey, they just don't believe that if we train the people will stay. Or my least favorite quote has now been, what if we train them and they leave? And that is not the right way to be thinking about this thought process. So I really appreciate that answer. And, I put in all asterisks here. They believe that anyone can do the job. They don't have the belief that people are what make that company. And I think if you have that thought process, even thinking about culture is, if that's the underlying belief, culture is not going to exist at the organization. The mission, the vision, values are not going to exist as an organization as well. So thank you for doing that. I want to pivot here to talk about the sustaining aspect of culture. So we talked about it not being something that you can set and forget. It's one thing, though, to say, okay, our vision wasn't where it was supposed to be. Now we're going to set the new vision, and we're all going to get rallied behind it. But over the last 24 months, you've also grown. You've added team members. You have probably expanded your reach, brought on new clients. Now we're talking about sustaining the culture. We've talked about a couple of the activities that you do. I want to know from like the leadership perspective, how often are you guys as a group talking about the culture? How do you make sure that we aren't closing our eye? And as you mentioned, letting it go or letting it slip for a little bit. How are you keeping this top of mind when you're trying to hit Q1 goals, when you're trying to prepare for a big client meeting? Just kind of walk us through. I know you had hinted at some of these tools, but I would love to hear a little bit more about that perspective to ensure that it scales with you as you continue to scale too.
So the first thing I would say is we measure it. And I don't just mean by employee engagement score that's done once a year. We have our pulse surveys, we have voluntary turnover, we have regrettable losses that we're looking at. We have a whole 9-box program that we're looking at to determine how we invest in our talent. We spend again, I want to say, sure, it's written into agendas for a biweekly meeting, but
Yeah.
outside of that, it's something that we're talking about daily and we're reviewing from a metrics perspective every single month. And if we're off on a metric, we create what's called an action A3. And that action A3, even if we're forecasting off, that action A3 is something that we dig into with what are the appropriate steps to ensure we get back on track. Now, um, I I shared, last year our turnover was tiny. This year our turnover has not been bad either. But we did lose 3 people to one client. So one
Mm,
client came in, poached 3 people from our organization, and we can't compete. Like there's certain things we just can't compete against with big pharma, right? It's just
yeah.
not possible. And they want our people because they're very well trained and they're amazing.
Yeah.
And so, but I had a really open conversation with my whole leadership team and say, did we not catch those 3 people because we were so focused on how we did last year? So when I think about what are we doing and how are we constantly looking at this, it literally is how are we making sure that we're not caught on our back foot? How are we having those skip level conversations? What are we hearing in the employee engagement committee? What are we hearing in the MOCAs with Michelle? What kind of information are we getting back from line managers, from the functional manager meetings, the town halls? It is it has to be woven in to what you do daily and weekly. Otherwise, it is the thing that you write, you post up on the wall so that when your clients come in or your prospective employees come in and everybody else just kind of laughs about it, right?
Yeah. I don't want to say that I was leading the witness there, but I wanted to hear that you have a scorecard and that you
Oh yeah.
have metrics. I think you
Oh yeah.
talked about the problem where the CEO thinks it's the CHRO's job and it's only their
Yeah.
job and they have to figure it out. And that disconnect of not seeing it at the strategic impact
Mhm.
level also comes because you haven't quantified or qualified it. You haven't understood how to measure success, how to measure failure, how to measure the leading and lagging indicators. I love the Action A3, like having a scorecard, and that's going to look different for every company. But you
Mhm.
have to have some way that is not just the employee satisfaction survey in June of every year to be able to
Yeah.
monitor that on a consistent basis. So I love to hear that. I think more and more teams need to start implementing that as they go forward as a way to monitor and measure success.
Exactly. Agreed. I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that we measured early on was effectiveness with onboarding. And then at 30, 60, and 90 days, did we hire the right talent? I'm
Oh, that's
sorry.
great.
When we first started, we weren't doing any of that. Now
Yeah,
we're doing all of that. And that's
that
helping
is
us to make
awesome.
sure that we can make decisions quickly if for some reason we brought somebody in who's not the right fit, right? Right person, wrong role. But what if it's wrong person, wrong role, right? And I
Yeah,
hate those types of environments, but that usually has to do with a cultural mismatch. Because
yeah.
nobody gets up and goes, I want to go do a really bad job today. That's never
Right.
anybody's goal, right?
Yeah, I love the even that hiring lens in the 30, 60, 90, and were they trained properly? I
Yeah.
think that comes back to the questions that you have to be willing to ask. And certainly
Hmm.
the concept of you got to hire, but you also have to be able to fire quickly, right? You have to make that decision. And a lot of times that does
Hmm.
come down to culture. And if you wait too long on a new hire who is eroding culture, it starts to pluck away at those people who are high potential employees and emerging leaders who have been there for years, and they start to see the wrong piece of the puzzle being there. So I love that
Yeah.
that is a part of that. I look down at the clock and we're at the 40-minute mark, and I could easily talk to you for another couple of hours. And I've just been so enamored with this conversation. I do want to say, Java with Jeannie, if you ever want to create a podcast, I think that it's there. Like, I think the
Okay.
name, the alliteration of it, I am certain you would have, like, you could do a little roundtable panel. I mean, Mocha's with Michelle as well. I feel like there's a huge marketing play there. And,
All
like,
right.
I think that it has to happen because it's like those roundtables or fireside chats that people do. And I think you would be fantastic at it because this episode has been exactly what I thought it would be. I'm going to give you a chance to kind of wrap all of this up. But before we do that, I've got to ask you the rapid fire questions. We ask every leader the same 4 questions, and then we'll figure out who we're going to interview next. But these 4 questions are going to go in a book at the end of the year, all the leaders that we interview with their questions, and about 30 seconds each, Jeannie. I'll give you some leeway if you go long on one because you're really excited. So let's see what we have. Question number 1. What is one leadership habit that you rely on every day, no matter what?
Clear, concise, and consistent communication.
Clear is kind is like my favorite. Like, you have to demand clarity. And one of my first bosses told me, if there's not clarity, you have to kindly demand it. And if you can't get that clarity, they don't have clarity themselves. And then there's no way to put you in a position to be successful. So I love it. And the only reason we went 30 seconds was because Alec opened his mouth, and he didn't have to do that. But that's an excellent start to an excellent start. Question number 2. What is the most underrated skill that a leader needs today to be successful?
A solid network that exists within and with outside their industry and within and with outside their business.
I have to be honest. We are episode 30, I think, today. And that's the first time that answer has come up. So I love that. Go ahead, elaborate.
I don't know how you can be a leader in any role in your company, regardless of whether you're a new manager or you're the CEO, and not have people who exist outside of your company that can give you ideas, or outside of your line of business. So, for example, if you're in sales, do you know somebody in IT? If you're in sales, how close are you with people in quality, right?
Yeah.
People that can help you to learn more. And I use it, and I value, and I call it, I value and I invest in my own network. And I think too many leaders don't. And they run it, they have a challenge. They're trying to set up in a new country. They're trying to launch a new offering. I don't know, they have a cyber attack, and their network is so small that they don't know who to ask. And they lose time as a result. So it's about building that network wide, deep, you name it.
Oh, I love that. And that's not only for leaders, but for anybody that's listening, that's the up and coming, right? That is, go put yourself out there, try to learn and connect as much as humanly possible. So you have those different perspectives. On the flip side of this, what is one thing that great leaders should stop doing?
Everything. They have you can't do everything. If you do everything, you don't do anything well. And so you have to be able to delegate, empower, and there's too many leaders who do it all themselves. And listen, I fall victim to it occasionally, right? And so it is a struggle for a lot of leaders, but it is something that we have to stop doing.
Yeah, a couple of times the topic of, you got to be able to delegate, you got to be able to teach, and you got to be able to hire people that you know are smarter than you in a certain area in order to be a great leader. So that's a great one. Last of the rapid fire is, what's the best leadership advice that you've ever received?
Somebody told me a long time ago that you get what you organize, measure, and incentivize. And I have said that 1 million times ever since they told me that. And so it's organize, measure, incentivize.
Wow.
So if your organization is screwed up and nobody understands roles and responsibilities, if you don't have the metrics and you don't incentivize against those metrics, you're going to be lost. And so as a result, it is something that I think about constantly. And I say that all the time.
I have a feeling that there are a lot of people who could look back at a problem over the last couple of years through that lens and be able to identify which bucket we fell short on, and there wasn't that clarity and conciseness within that bucket.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever gone into a company and you didn't understand what people did or why they did it? And it's usually because it's not organized well. There's nothing being measured, or we're measuring the wrong things, right?
Yeah.
And you're incentivizing the wrong behaviors.
Whew. You 2 out of 4 never have been mentioned on this show, and that is what it's all about. That's you get 2 gold tokens that will
Nice.
be mailed to you in the
Thank
next
you.
year. I love it. The last question that I have for you before we wrap up is, who is a leader that we should interview next? Somebody that is doing meaningful work that others can learn from, and that the Activating Greatness would be blessed with their participation here on the show.
I'm going to call out 2 people, Dave Esposito and Bob Dempsey.
Yeah. Do you want to? I always send the video. Do you want to give them a little shout out of why you're recommending them?
I'll start with Dave Esposito. I mean, he is a leader in the ophthalmic space. He's running a really pioneering biotech company. He has invested countless hours into developing his team and leadership, and lots with training. And so he's just somebody I think a lot of people could learn some really good things from. And then Bob Dempsey is someone who I have just come to truly appreciate. His partnership style, how he tackles problems, how he looks towards the solution as opposed to dwelling on an issue. And he's a networking champion. So there's just so many good things about both of those gentlemen.
I love it. Well, Dave and Bob, as you're watching this, I hope that you are our next guest here on the episode or on the Activating Greatness podcast, because Julie's recommendation is one of the ways that we landed this incredible guest. Jeanne, you have been everything that I could have hoped for when we initially connected. And then last week when we had our prep call, I was so excited just with the way that you talk about vision, the way that you talk about culture, and that you're not just saying it, that you really believe in this process. You're putting in the work and then, frankly, reaping the rewards from at the organizational level and certainly at the individual level. What's the final takeaway? If someone, if someone asked, hey, give me your final thoughts or a way to kind of summarize all of the things that we talked about today, where would you point people? What would you want them to take away from this conversation and, frankly, this important topic?
I'd say that we do serious work and we don't take ourselves too seriously. Building culture is serious work, but have fun while you're doing it.
Ooh, I love it. That might just be the promo for the episode as we promote this here over the next couple of weeks. I know that anybody that's listening to this is thinking, wow, this is probably one of the best episodes of the Activating Greatness podcast. You are absolutely right. Make sure that you reach out to Jeanne, connect with her on LinkedIn. Go check out what the Lexitas Pharma team is doing. We will put all of this, the links to Jeanne's LinkedIn and to Lexitas within the show notes. One of the things that we hear is you all listening, reaching out to the guest and saying, hey, I listened to your episode and I learned this or learned that, has been really rewarding for not only the guests, but certainly for us to continue to hear that feedback. So please go and do it. As you're listening and thinking this is great, please make sure you sign up and download on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said, this is episode 30. Somehow we're on pace for 60, 70, 80 here in 2026. The only reason that's possible is the wonderful audience that we have, and certainly the incredible guests like Jeanne that we continue to have on the show. But I still have to prove that it works. So 5-star reviews, download, shares, all of that is great and continues to tell us that these are stories that we want to tell. So Jeanne, one more time, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, you sharing your expertise with us. And thank you again to the Activating Greatness audience for being a part of a community of leaders who refuse to settle for good enough. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.